Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. We've been thinking a lot recently about Anakin due to his recent appearance in the World Between Worlds, where it seems that he has finally reached the full potential of the Chosen One. This is a state that we have wanted to see Skywalker reach for many years, and heretofore, we never realized that it was apparently still possible. For obvious reasons, Anakin wasn't able to really come into his own as the Chosen One during his life, as he spent the first part of it weighed down by Jedi dogma and tradition, and the latter half consumed by the dark side. By the end of his life though, he had interestingly accumulated equal time in both sides of the Force, having spent exactly 22 years as a Jedi and almost exactly 22 years as a Sith. But now that we get to see what a fully realized Anakin looks like, not only in power but also in personality, we have decided that it might have actually been a mistake for Anakin to have ever been a Jedi. In today's video, my friends, we are going to explore a theory of ours that Anakin wasn't supposed to become a Jedi, and he would have been far better off having gone down a different path. He might have even reached his full potential in his lifetime. There's much more to discuss, so let's get into it. Much of Anakin's young life was about him trying to become a Jedi. It was certainly the will of the Force for Qui-Gon to find Anakin on Tatooine and rescue him from slavery. But for every moment following this, he has been nothing but an uphill battle when trying to become a fully fledged Jedi Master. The Jedi High Council acknowledged his natural strength in the Force, but refused to train him because of the fear that he had inside himself. While they were ultimately proven correct, we have to lay the blame on the environment that the Jedi Order and the Council created, which pushed Anakin down this selfish path. Anyway, Qui-Gon had to push for Anakin to be trained, to the point where Qui-Gon directly defied the Council's orders, the Jedi Code, and all reason. Then right after this, Qui-Gon was murdered, and the chance for Anakin to get a proper training dies with him. Anakin is able to progress quickly as a youngling through the early years of training, but he is scorned by his classmates and is something of an outcast to the Order as a whole, the Jedi Council calling into question the validity of the Chosen One prophecy. Many Jedi grew to view Anakin Skywalker as a troublemaker, and it took a while for him and Obi-Wan to build a trusting relationship, and their dynamic was heavily strained for the longest time. It appears as though from start to finish, Anakin was almost set up to fail. The clear question to ask recalling all of these events is, did the Force not want Anakin to become a Jedi? It's difficult to say for certain. To suggest that the Force didn't want him trained definitively as a Jedi definitely flies in the face of the Qui-Gon Jinn theory, which is that the will of the Force killed Qui-Gon so that it would be set in motion the chain of events leading to Order 66, the end of the Jedi, and Anakin embracing the dark side, eventually balancing out the light with the dark. However, we cannot say that Darth Vader was the will of the Force. The theory we are suggesting today is just another perspective. This states that Qui-Gon's death was not the will of the Force itself, but rather happenstance from the Sith trying to disrupt what Anakin had to become. Anakin would feel drawn towards the dark side his whole life due to all the tragedies and fear that he suffered. And yet, it is an interesting thought to consider that possibly it wasn't even really the dark side Anakin was drawn to, but rather drawn to the balance instead. As it is stated by the father of Mortis, who represented the balance in the Force, he believed it was Anakin's job to take over his position and keep his children in line. While this didn't turn out to be Anakin's destiny exactly, it did foreshadow what he needed to do, which in the end, it became his job to maintain balance in the Force. I think Anakin always felt this pull towards the balance, which was why he was fascinated with the dark side despite being in the light as a Jedi. I think it was far more nuanced than just a classic story of a Jedi tempted by the powers of the dark side. Perhaps it started as a fascination with it from his innate desire for balance as the Chosen One, but that he was warped and tempted into lust after it over time, eventually wanting the dark side more than he should have. With this in mind, I firmly believe that had Anakin been a Sith from the start, he would have eventually felt the pull to the light, because he was innately drawn to the balance. Even without his trauma, Anakin always had a natural leaning to the dark side. He had been a social outcast since he wasn't brought up like the rest of the younglings. Anakin saw his own path and discovered that he had an entirely different set of interests. Anakin enjoyed battle a great deal, far more than meditation, and he desired to study the blade far more than the study of the Force. Anakin was a problem solver, one who wasn't satisfied until he took care of an issue hands-on. He was opportunistic, spontaneous, and explosive. This was translated to being brash and headstrong, and yet, that was a part of it, but not the entire picture. The domineering way of the dark side would leak its way into Anakin's life whether he was a Jedi or not. We can see this by Anakin's choice of lightsaber combat, which is Form 5, the most offensive form of them all. Besides that, Anakin was also a contrarian when it came to his choice of color palette for his attire. Once Jedi reached Padawanhood, they're allowed or encouraged to either continue wearing the traditional Jedi robes and tunics, or to choose their own clothing. Much to the chagrin of the Jedi Masters, Anakin wore almost all black and dark colors. He did so because he was physically representing himself as the black sheep of the Jedi, and he embraced it unapologetically. In addition, Anakin also embraced a much different view when it came to how he operated as a Jedi. In Ahsoka, Anakin didn't mind the fact that the Jedi Order had changed. In fact, he saw it as a necessary thing. What many see as the Jedi's greatest weakness and mistake was their militarization during the Clone Wars conflict. Anakin, though, believed that this was the correct course of action. As he told Ahsoka, Obi-Wan had trained him to be a peacekeeper, but now the galaxy had changed, and the Jedi were forced to adapt along with it. It was the adapting Jedi that would survive Order 66 in the end, and beyond this, Anakin rejected the Jedi way of detachment, and allowed himself to care about others no matter how many times he was told the opposite. On Geonosis, when the droid factory collapsed with Ahsoka and Barriss inside, Master Luminara was ready to give up on them and move on, accepting that Barriss had died. But Anakin refused to surrender, not willing to allow their Padawans to be left behind with the chance that they might actually have survived. Thanks in part due to the continued rescue efforts of Anakin, Ahsoka, and Barriss both lived and made it out safely. There are many cases dotted all around the Clone Wars of Anakin acting exactly the same way, especially when he thought Obi-Wan had died to Rako Hardeen. This is taken even further in Revenge of the Sith, in the novelization when Yoda, Mace, and Obi-Wan are all discussing Anakin after giving him the mission to spy on the Chancellor. Obi-Wan straight out tells the two council members that Anakin is not like them or any other Jedi. He is loyal to people, not ideals. He is willing to sacrifice the mission and the majority for his friends, something that Obi-Wan had been on the receiving end of several times as Anakin had constantly saved him. This is all because Anakin's greatest weakness is also his strength, his love. Compassion is promoted by the Jedi, passion promoted by the Sith, but where the two ends meet is love. And Anakin has this in droves. Having been brought up in an affectionate household with his mother, Anakin carried that sense of care for others during his entire life. He was berated for it as a Jedi, and it was used against him as a Sith. However, what many miss is that love is the very nature of the balance of the Force. This was the idea that Darth Revan had already thought of many thousands of years earlier in Legends. In the Revan novel, we look into his contemporaries as he debates whether or not it was worth it to bring his findings in the Force to the Jedi Council, or whether to keep them secret. These findings being that after spending time both in the light and the dark side, Revan had discovered a way to use the Force where he would remain in the light, but have the raw power and techniques of the dark. Revan believed that with love, they could do it all. This was through love and passionate joy, but primarily love. Luke Skywalker allowed his Jedi to marry and have children so that they'd be able to find something to fight for. This was the same academy where he also allowed certain students to even study the dark side. In the very beginning of the Jedi Order, they were all familial, and widespread love was important because they knew the balance between the Ashla and the Bogan. The light and the dark was balance, this love for everything, a passion. To put the final pin in it, let's look at the father of Mortis. He was strict, assumptive, and quite domineering, but he had great love for his children, both of them equally. The son caused him great grief, but the one's very representations of the various aspects of the Force were portrayed as a family that fights, that even goes as far as basically killing each other, but a family that in the end still loved each other the most. The Master Anakin that we see in Ahsoka is what he was always meant to be. Perhaps if he had never joined the Jedi, but learned the Force in some other way, Anakin would have reached this state on his own by embracing the part of him that was drawn to love other people. It would be through this that his passion would be balanced out by compassion, and he would be a master of the light and dark, just as Revan theorized that he could. In the end, it was the love shown by Luke that turned Anakin back to the light side, and set him on the ultimate path of the Chosen One, to establish true balance and understand the truth of it. And now, because of how much he cares for Ahsoka, he is able to use his vast power to help her on her way, to teach her. But anyway, my friends, do you believe Anakin shouldn't have been trained by the Jedi? Do you believe that Darth Revan would have been the ultimate master for Anakin Skywalker? If Anakin were to have been freed from slavery but set on a different path, what do you think would have come about it? Were the Sith watching him for far too long? Or in the end, did the Jedi hold him back just as Anakin felt that they did? Let us know your thoughts and opinions on this down below, as well as our analysis on the Force and the dueling sides. As always, my friends, may the Force be with you, and I hope to see you in a later video.